Hi fellow Django developers, Ezekiel here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that helps you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you feel find this video important. Let's get into it. So today we are going to be in our last tutorial, which is like 4 months ago because I've not been uploading. We looked at Django serializers. Before that, we looked at class-based views, class-based API views in Django, right? So I thought it wise to start up after 4 months looking at how to use those two tutorials to make a functional API in Django, right? In Django Rest Framework, right? So in this tutorial, we are going to be going over the serializer and API view, right? So if you haven't watched those videos, I suggest you should watch them. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It should also be popping out on your screen as a card right now, right? Because I'll also add that to the video, right? So just like I said, if you don't know about serializers, just go through. It's not hard. Highest 30 minutes video, you go through it, you understand what you are going to do and follow up with this, right? So so first thing we're going to do is come to our model and we'll create a model class, right? So let's create a class, call it book, right? Let's say it's a model that we want to use and store books, right? We want to store the book name and the book description, just basic stuffs, right? So say models dot character field, maximum length is 30, whatever, no is false, right? Blank false, if I can spell. Blank is false also, right? Then we say description. I'm thinking description will be a text field, right? So a text field, it should be models here. I can type today. So this should be the basic difference between a text field and a character field is that a character field has a maximum length of expects a maximum length of characters, while a text field like can take up any amount of characters, right? So the description can be bigger than the name of the book, right? So that's why I suggest we use the text field as the description and use character field as the name of the book, right? So let's write the string representation here real quick. We return the self.name, which is the book name, right? So after doing this, we have our model right here now. So what's the next thing for us to do? We run our migration. I'll stop our server. Let's say make migrations, right? We'll make migrations, then we migrate to the database, right? So we say migrate, right? Migrate, right? So we have our model all set up right here. So the next thing for us to do, our migration has completed successfully. So the next thing is for us to create our serializers file and the serializers class, right? Again, if you don't know about serializers, go and watch the tutorial. I'll leave a link to it in the description. So we say from rest framework, just waiting for autocomplete to help me out, but I'm guessing it won't. So okay, thank God. So so from rest framework we import serializers, then from our model class models we import the book model because we'll use it, right? So we'll create the book serializer, right? So create the book serializer, right, which we inherit from the model serializer. Sorry for the errors, sorry for the mistakes. So which we inherit from the model serializer, right? So the model serializer is just a serializer that we use to serialize our model, right? It makes it easy for us. So if we should use something like serializers, though the normal serializer, we need to pass in something like name, and we now say serializers dot jar field character field, right? Character field, right? But instead of doing this, then describing, then defining fields here, we can simply use the model serializer. Then Django Rest Framework will look at our model, which we are going to specify. Look at our model, look at the fields in our model, and make decisions on what to input into our serializer class, right? If you can understand me. So let's say class meta, right? Then field is equal to, or let's specify the model first. Which model do you want to handle? That's the book model, right? Then we'll say fields, not fields plural, and underscore all, right? So underscore all, this we use this, normally this is normally a list, right? A list. Again, if you don't know about serialize, I'm just going through this real quick so that we can continue, so that the video will not be that long, right? So if you don't know about serialize, please go and watch the tutorials, right? So instead of listing out name, description, which is obviously these fields that we have in this model, right? In this model, which is name, description. So we can simply say all here, right? So what the serializer we do is simply look at our model, taking all the fields we have in our model, right? So this will be the same as specifying name and description here, right? So but this is a little bit long-winded, and this makes it easier for me, most probably easier for you too, right? So this is our model done, this is our serializers done. Then here come to our view, which is the meat of the whole thing, right? So in our view, this is where this is like functions that we created, API, functional API views, right? Again, if you don't know about this, I'll also leave a link to it in the description. It might also be popping up on your screen because I'll also add it as a card on this video, right? So in our view file here, in our views.py file, what we are going to do is first let's import the serializer we just created, because we are going to use it. So from dot serializers, we import the book serializer. We import the book serializer. I think we also need the model, so we import that real quick. Import book model, right? Which other thing? I think we need the status, so that we can return a specific status code when we need that, right? So we say from rest framework, just like always, we import status, right? So we have the response. I think that's all. Whatever we need later on, we can come back and import it, of course. So we can say class, right? So what we are trying to achieve here is that we are trying to create APIs that will handle CRUD functions. If you know about CRUD function, CRUD, that's create, read, update, and delete, right? So most probably in this video we'll look at creating and reading, right? Then in the next tutorial we'll be looking at updating and deleting, right? So that we'll make this modular and so that you can understand and follow up, right? So here now we'll create a class that will handle creating the instance of a book and getting instances of books in our database, right? So if we say class, let's create a class here. Let's name this class create and read book, yeah, or books, right? So we import, I forgot the API view itself. So of course we can always import that dot views import API view, right? So we create this API view, then we inherit from it. Again, if you don't know about API views, the link will be in the description for you to look at it. This is very important. I will go through it. I will also recap on it, but it's very important you go to the video where we discussed in depth about API view, so that it will also help you, right? But if you can follow from this tutorial, no problem, right? So API view is a class, right? So it's a class that we can inherit from while creating our own API views, right? It's a class we can inherit from that we can override, right? For instance, we have HTTP methods. If you know about HTTP methods, we have the post request, have the get request, we have the update request, uh, we have the post request, sorry, we have the get request, we have the patch request, we have the delete request. I guess we have read also, we have several of them, but I think post, get, update, patch, put are the most important ones, right? So with the API view, we can create methods here that will methods with the same name of our HTTP request that will be executed when that HTTP method is requested to this class, right? So let's slow it down and try to understand, right? What I'm trying to say is basically in this class we just created, right? We inherit from API view, right? Then if we make a method here and call this method get, right? What it means is that when get request, when we use this API view in our URLs, right? And get request is made to this class, right? This get request will be run when a get request is made to this view, right? So when you make a get request to this view, this method will be run. For instance, let's say pass here, then post request self the request, right? So when you make get request, this one will run. When you make post request, this one will run, right? Obviously, if you also have something like delete, which we'll have in the next tutorial, delete request, right? So when you make get request here, this one will run. When you make post request, this one will run. When you make delete request, this one will run, right? So that's what I'm trying to say in essence, right? Hopefully I tried enough to explain this. If you don't understand, please watch the video so that you understand more, right? So let's start up with creating, right? Let's start up with the post. Let's start up with creating an instance of a book, right? So to create the instance of a book, obviously we need to get the name from the front end, right? We want the front end to pass in the name of the book. Now to get what the front end passes in, we say request.data.get. So what is this request.data and what is this .get, right? So request.data is just used to access the request body that the client or the front end sends, right? So it just contains the body of the request that the client sends to our API, right? So if from the JavaScript, right, from the front end, which is most probably JavaScript, right? So from the front end, if we make a request with this type of a body with maybe name as this, then description as whatever, right? So this request.data will be a dictionary of the request body from the front end, right? So it's a dictionary. Then we use the .get dictionary method, Python dictionary method to get each instance, right? With the name here corresponding with the key, with the key of the dictionary value we want to get, right? So we get the name, then we also need the description. So description, right? Then after the description, so obviously now we have the two main properties parameters that we need: the name of the book, the description of the book, right? So what next, right? So let's create an instance of our serializer. So from the former tutorials, from the older tutorial where we discussed serializers, I mentioned that serializer is just a class that helps us, like our model, our Python Django model is a Python class, right? Now to be able to send that model instance to the front end, right? The front end is not Python per se, unless Python starts handling front end, but the front end is not Python, right? For us to be able to serialize these classes, these model classes, and be able to send it to the front end, we need these serializers, right? So these serializers are classes that will help us pass our models and make it possible for us to pass it to the front end, pass data to the front end, and also for us to interact with it. So that's what serializers are. So we create this book serializers instance right here, right? Then for us to tell these serializers that we need to create a new value in our model, right? We must pass in this data, right? Data, right? So this data will be an object corresponding to the parameters of the instance we want to create to the database, right? So this will be data. Let's create data dictionary here, right? That will be name, description, as description, right? So what am I doing here? Now this name here, this name right here corresponds to the name of the field in our model, right? So this name here, this name here, this description here. So they must correspond to the name of the fields in our model, right? So the name, the description, this should be the same as what we have here, right? For the serializers to be able to know the fields it has to pass in these parameters into, right? So the data, then we then pass in the data. So after doing this, what's the next thing? The next thing is obviously to save to the database. With what we have now, we haven't saved to the database. Now to save to the database, we call the serializer.save method, right? Then for us to be able, with what we have now, with this right now, this will probably throw an error. This will definitely throw an error, right? So because we need to call the serializer dot is valid method, right? So what does this serializer dot is valid method, what does it do? So the serializer dot is valid method is used to make sure that our serializer is valid before we save to the database. So let's say maybe the name here is null, or maybe the description is null, or maybe the name, the data type is not a string, is not a character, is maybe a byte or something, like, provided it's not valid, right? So this is valid is used to check if the data we passed in is valid, right? So it will return a boolean true or false. Obviously true meaning is valid, false meaning is not valid, right? So let's say if else, let's use if else, right? So say if is valid, if this is valid, save to the database. If it's not valid, we do something else, right? So let's say if is valid right here, let me close this. So if this is valid right now, if it is valid, right, we save to the database. So after saving to the database, let's return a response, because that's always right to do. Then the response body will be, let's say, a message of book was created successfully. I don't think my spelling is correct, but who cares, right? So the book instance, let's also return the book instance in case for any reason the front end needs it. So to return the book instance, right, sorry for the noise. So to return the book instance, we use the serializer dot is data, right? So this serializer dot data will return to us a serialized form, that's a form, a serialized form of this data that we passed in here, right? So it will contain the data that was just saved to the database, right? So this will happen when this serializer is valid. Then when it's not valid, what happens? Let's say we return a response of data and say maybe message this is not valid, right? We can obviously return a string here, but like it's better for us to return something that the front end will look at and know the error, right? So if on this serializer we have the dot errors, dot errors, right? So this will contain the errors that the mistakes that are in this data, right? So let's specify a status code. Let's say the status code here should be, obviously is a client error, so it should be 400, right? 400 bad request. Then specify the status code here. This is created, right? So it should be 201 if I'm right. So 201 created, right? So that's for that, for creating our book instance, right? So let's go to the get, right? So get, we use this method to return the instances of the books that are created in the database, right? So say books is equal to book dot objects dot all, right? So we get all the books from the database, then we return response, right? Response data, then we say books, then we say book serializer, then we pass in books, right? This is how it should be done, right? But I will tell us now that this will not work, right? This will throw an error, and I will allow it to throw the error so that you know what causes the error, how to resolve it if you should get it, and something like that. So with the benefit of hindsight, I'm telling us now that this right here will throw an error, and when it does that, I'll come back to it, explain it, and we can continue from there, right? So the next thing will be obviously to use this in our URL file, in our URLs file. So I'll come to our URLS.py file, I import this. So parts, say create and get books, because of course that's what we're doing here, as views, then the name, which is not necessary, also call it create and get books, right? So that should be that, fingers crossed. Let me also open my postman real quick. If you don't know about postman, I honestly recommend postman, right? So postman is just a software for testing. Let me just bring this down. So this postman right here is just a software for testing our client, our APIs and stuffs like that, right? So this is Postman. It's just a client software that you can use to test your APIs, right? If you don't know about, I guess we have a tutorial on this channel where we discuss how to use Postman to like test our APIs, right? So, but if we don't, maybe I'll look at that, creating a short tutorial describing how to use Postman to test your APIs and stuff like that, right? So now this is our application, our server is running, right? So if I crank this up, so this is our server is running right now on localhost, but it's 8,000, right? So if we come down here, this is our URL, so let's copy this, go to postman, so our domain, this, right? So when we make get request, when we make this get request, it will, so what I was trying to explain earlier is that for this API view right now that we just created, when we make a get request to this API view right now, when we make get request, this function will be executed, right? Because the name here is get. When we make post request, this function will be executed, right? So like I said, I'm expecting an error here on the get request, so let's not do it first, let's do the post request first, right? So let's change this to post, right? So on the post, we specify the name of the book and the description of the book. Let's say for now, let's just remove it, right? Let's send it like that. Fingers crossed. Okay, so you can see the message with the errors, right? So you see message now, for name, this field is can may not be null, this field may not be null. So if you come back here, go through our code, you can see that that's what we will specify. This is the message key, and this is the serializer errors, right? So we go back here, this is the message and this is the serializer errors, right? So let's put this back. So the name of the book is Facebook. I don't know if you guys can see it very well. So the name of the book is Facebook. Description of the book is, this is the description, as simple as that, right? So if we send this, fingers crossed, you can see that it has been created. Book was created successfully. Then book, this is the instance of the book that was created, just like we specified in our API, right? So this is the message and this is the book data, right? So now let's change this to post request, right? Let's change this to post request. Let's make the request, right? So you can see we got an error just like I told us, right? So you can see that it's saying something like object of type book serializer is not JSON serializable, right? So let's go through this and see what it's trying to say, go through the error and understand it, right? So if I hover over this book.object.o, you can see that it's returning a list, a base manager, a list of books. That's what it's returning. So it's not returning an instance of a book, right? So for this serializer, serializer is expecting an instance of a book, not a list of book. So is expecting to see something like book book.name, a book.name. That is what is expecting to see, right? Something like that. But book.name right now will return an error because this is not an instance of a book but a list of books, right? So for us to be able to do this, for us to be able to maneuver this, we will have to specify passing another argument here, which is the many is equal to true, right? Then we extract the data, right? So it's the data that we are trying to get, right? So this, of course, this is a class, right? It's a class with different values. With the dot save, we have seen dot save, we have seen dot valid, right? So what we need is the data. So if you say many is equal to true, so what does this tell Django Rest Framework? It tells Django Rest Framework, hey, this is not an instance of a book. This is a list of books. I'm expecting many books in this variable right here, right? So don't treat it like one instance of a book. Treat it like a list of books, right? So with that done, let's go back, send our request. You can see that it has been returned successfully, right? So this is the list of books stored in our database, right? So let's go through this again. See, so first of all, we created our model. This is our model right here. Then we created our serializers. This is our serializer.py file, which houses the model we are expected to handle, the fields we are working with. Then in our views.py file, which is where all the tags are being carried out, we created our class, inherited from API view, created our methods, which will handle different HTTP methods when the requests are sent. Then for our post, we accepted the request arguments, the request body sent from the front end, created the data dictionary, passed it to our serializers, called the is valid method to make sure that this serializer instance that we created is valid. Then we save to our database, return the response, right? Then obviously we used it in our URLs, right? Then for the post request, we simply got all the books in the database and returned them as a response, making sure to pass in this many is equal to true, since we are getting a list of books, right? Not an instance of a book. So if we should say maybe book.first, right? This should return you an instance of a book, right? So in such case, if you pass in many is equal to true, I'm guessing it will throw an error also, right? So it will throw an error also, because right now it's trying to, you can see here, let me just bring this up. Let me just bring it. You can see book object is not iterable. So it's not an iterable instance. It is a list of book. Of course, we have to remove this. in order for it to work again. Let's wait for our server to refresh. So it's refreshed, it will send again. This will return an instance of one book. So that's just it, right? So let's return to what we had, the data, and send the request one more time, and that is that for this, right? So that's that for this tutorial. So in the next tutorial, of course, we said we want to be going to create, read, update, and delete, right? So right now we have gone through creating and reading, right? In the next tutorial, we'll be looking at updating and deleting. Why? Because spoilers alert, right? Spoilers alert. For updating and deleting, we are going to be accepting request arguments, right? So because we want to know the exact book we want to update and the exact book we want to delete, right? So we'll be accepting request arguments, which is the book ID. I guess I'm saying a lot. Which is the book ID. We get it, we delete it. Yeah. So if you have not subscribed, subscribe already. Like the video, share this video. Have a nice day. Peace.